All right, thanks for joining us today on a Family Through Service, a V2VG podcast, and I think I got it again.
Yeah, I think so. This is twice in a row.
Yeah, so things are going swimmingly for me now.
I think we hopefully will have visual confirmation this time, right?
Yeah, last time there was a hiccup in technology, but, you know, that's how that goes. So we're going to do, so the last few podcasts and video YouTube podcasts as well, we were sort of lighthearted.
Yeah, you know.
Or at least not as serious.
And I think that's important, you know. We always talk about veterans and their sense of humor and stuff, so I think it's important. And I imagine that workers in the first responder community have similar senses of humor, you know. So I think that it's always good for us to stick to that. But
I agree.
Yesterday, when we did what we did, and we'll get into that, it should have been a very happy time, and but it really was heavy heartening to me, and it made me think about the things that some American civilians have said about service members and veterans and stuff, and I really wanted to talk about that, and then some of the things that veterans are doing to that actually prove those people wrong.
I agree. The disparaging of the U.S. veteran has happened for a while now. I can't speak for times before World War II, because before that I've always been under the assumption that veterans were generally respected, or at least during World War I and II.
Yeah.
Because during the Civil War, I know there was problems. In World War I, there was problems, but I know they were respected, at least back on the home front, from civilian to civilian. But when we got to Vietnam and the peace and love generation and the civil rights generation, that type of social unrest sort of carried over, and people blamed the military for a lot of the societal problems that the government had at the time. But they didn't just blame the military, they blamed the members of the military. And don't forget, a lot of them were draftees at the time. They didn't choose to go into the military, they were forced.
Well, yeah, and then on top of it, you know, as the saying goes, don't blame the player, blame the game, right? I mean,
sure,
the average soldier or Marine or sailor has nothing to do with where they are, what their missions are, right, and, you know, what type of casualties that are going to come from that.
And certainly nothing to do with making of policy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have less of a voice while you're still serving than the average American citizen.
Yeah, because we're not allowed to voice certain opinions or espouse certain opinions. We're not supposed to, like while in uniform and things like that, because UCMJ prohibits certain activities.
Well, plus, what it comes down to is overall, the President of the United States is our boss. Like,
he's the commander-in-chief,
you know,
so we have to kind of shut our mouth.
Yeah, whether you voted for him or not. Yeah, there's just... and I think it's important because it is to keep unity within units and branches of service.
Right. And so one of the problems, so I think that for the sake of this episode, we should probably go from Vietnam forward.
And I agree. I think that's, I mean, even Korea maybe a little bit.
Okay,
but,
that's fair.
You know, I think Korea, just like Desert Storm, has kind of been lost in the history books, so to speak. But yeah, I think you see the biggest impact of media presence and civilian, I don't want to say interruption, but involvement with service members coming home and transitioning into veterans, or trying to become civilians again, trying to get either their old jobs back or new jobs or whatever they may be.
I think that's fair. And from my opinion is that the more, and it seems counterintuitive, that the more access the civilian media has to a conflict while in the conflict, during the conflict, the more the American public, the civilian public, denigrates the military because they just don't understand what's happening. And of course, you have the media bias that's spinning what's happening. It's kind of like that picture of a soldier with a rifle that's kind of at low arm, like not port arms, but kind of down, slung low. and there's a Vietnamese person there, and the whole picture shows them preparing to give this prisoner water.
Yeah.
Right? Now, when you crop the picture one direction, it looks like they're getting ready to execute the prisoner.
Yeah.
And you crop the picture the other way, it looks like they're just giving him water, like just being nice, and there's no weapon involved. And then the whole picture shows that he's under guard, but they're giving him water. So it all depends on how you spin, or or how you crop the image, and that shows that media, okay, can influence or even outright control the narrative that the civilian public has over the military. And in Vietnam, that was really the first time that the civilian media had close to unfettered access to what was happening and what happened at home. The civilian population, not all.
No,
right?
no, of course.
The younger civilian population turned on the veterans, and now there were legitimate war crimes that were committed by U.S. forces, but they were far and few between. But the civilian population assumed that it was a standard practice.
Well, yeah, and again, even if there were, war crimes or crimes against humanity that were happening, I'm willing to bet the average soldier or Marine that was involved in that had nothing to do with the orders, or he may not even known what was happening until it was too late.
Right.
And
there's a lot involved.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it's more times than not, it comes from somebody, way far away from the actual combat. Sure. Sitting there smoking their cigar, drinking their...
like do this, do that, micromanaging. And again, we're painting with the broader brush, but in a lot of times that's the case. And the civilian population, what are some of the things that veterans were called then and even now? But sometimes baby killers.
Oh, God, yeah, murderers, baby killers, psychopaths, right?
Idiots, morons, because you're too stupid, you have to join the military, and,
all you good for is pulling the trigger, right?
Yeah, robots, zombies.
And, it's frustrating.
Up till today.
Well, I mean, it was still happening when I got home from Iraq the first time in 2004. Actually, it would have been 2005. There was still, we were not allowed to get off the plane when we finally crossed into United States airspace and we landed in New York because there were protesters who were being violent. So if that is not at all a welcome home,
outside the gate, the main gate at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where I was stationed, there was Westboro Baptist Church. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
You probably are.
They're the Southern Baptist, right? That's
what they claim. Yeah, Westboro Baptist Church, and they were the ones holding up signs saying things like, "God hates gays," and "We're glad your soldier died," and things like that. Just terrible, terrible, terrible things to say. And we came home from the conflict. We came home from the war, and we weren't allowed to go out of the gate because they were there protesting the war while we came home, right outside Fort Campbell, with all these signs like, "We're glad your soldier died." 14 people in my unit died on one night over there in November. So, just as an example, more than 14 died from my unit, but in one night.
Yeah.
So, it really hit home for us to see this, and they were calling us savages.
That's another one, and
that really bothers the shit out of me because I saw firsthand the things that we did to assist the Iraqi civilians, and what I did myself, and what we did as coalition forces is far from savagery, in my humble opinion, and we can talk about that in a second.
Yeah, and it's absolutely true. I mean, and there are things that have happened from civilians that have, I don't want to say triggered as far as PTSD, but triggered as far as affected the pride of a combat veteran or service member coming home. Things like taking their hat or cover, throwing it on the ground, spitting on them,
or the
burning of the flags, these type of things. And it has nothing to do with them having PTSD. But when you join the military and you have a certain sense of pride, and these people are doing this, it absolutely flips a switch for you to want to react.
Yeah, and it's not a blanket statement about all military members, because I have friends that I fought with over in overseas and are left-leaning Democratic people. Some are even liberals, and they might not have a problem with that, but generally veterans do. And everybody has their opinion. Everybody has their right to their opinion, but when you start saying things like you were savages and you were baby killers and you were brainwashed and you were, you did this and you did that, like it was our fault and it was our policy and it was our decision. It's not the way things work. And I could tell you a couple things that we did in my unit alone in the 101st Airborne. A couple of things we did. When, after the war phase was over, the invasion phase, we moved into SASO operations, SASO, which is Stability and Support Operations. And one of the things that we did was we moved up into the city of Mosul, Iraq, which is in the northern region of the country. And one of the things we did was to stabilize the region by building and securing infrastructure that Saddam Hussein dismantled, and then we kind of had to try to build back up and also rebuild schools. And one of the things we did was we supplied the schools with school supplies, and I'm talking tractor trailers full of pencils and paper and erasers and even teddy bears for the kids, for example.
Oh, yeah.
And I was on the detail that had to move these boxes full of paper. You know how heavy a box full of paper? I mean, if you've ever gone to Staples and had to move a ream of paper, a box of reams of paper, imagine a big box that takes 2 soldiers to move. And we had crates full of these things.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
ridiculous. This is not something that we had to do. It's something that coalition forces, the United States, chose to do. That's not a savage thing to do.
And it's really important, I think, for others to understand is that as different phases happen, so during the invasion, our rules of combat, rules of engagement are very different.
Yes.
During an invasion, pretty much is if you see somebody holding arms, there's a possibility for you to be able to fire upon that person. Because it's the invasion of the war.
Yeah, it's that phase.
And but as you back off into the say-so, now the RUE changes to almost to the point where they have to actually, the enemy has to fire at you.
For you to respond.
So
and it's not a good rule of engagement if you ask me, but that's what it is.
It really shows.
And is that
what
savage?
The Americans,
really not savage to me.
And NATO. I have to give NATO a big round of applause because we try to follow these rules, despite the enemy or the countries that we're combating against don't.
And we should actually talk about the difference between insurgents and terrorists, because we fought both.
Well, that's definitely a whole nother.
Yeah, because I can respect the insurgency and I don't respect the terrorists.
Yeah, it's a whole nother,
whole different thing.
And it's funny because you mentioned about how at the end of Saddam's regime, he was destroying schools and dismantling them.
Dismantling infrastructure, too. Cutting off water to some towns.
Yeah.
As for example.
And it was happening when I was in. We were trying to maintain electricity for these towns.
Those big generators.
And again, as you said, insurgents and terrorists would go and actually bomb, and whether it would destroy the electric company building for a day or a catastrophic loss, the townspeople blamed the Americans that we were playing some sort of a psychological warfare type stuff.
That's what Saddam's regime would do. They would turn the electricity on and then turn it off to subjugate the people. But that's not the American and coalition forces way. But they would blame us. It's like, no, it's your people or your people who are doing this, and we're trying to fucking fix it. We're trying to help you.
What do you mean, my people?
Yeah,
right?
my people. and the same thing happened in Mosul. They would bomb or attack or somehow sabotage the electrical grid, and then the elders of the city would come and yell at our leaders and say, why aren't you protecting our power grid? And we're like, it's not our responsibility to protect your power grid, but we will. Matter of fact, one of the big casualties we had, one of the most shocking casualties we had was, and I'm not going to get into it because of the respect out of his family, but it was out of an NCO who was protecting an electrical, a region of an electrical grid, and he was killed doing that job by terrorists, and that wasn't even really supposed to be our responsibility. It was their responsibility. And there's a lot of details into it. I'm not going to get into it. I could talk to you, Mike, about it. But it was the saddest part was he didn't die fighting the war. He died protecting the infrastructure of a city that they blamed us when it went down. But he was fighting to protect it. A savage wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
right?
And again, it goes back to rules of engagement.
Yeah.
If
and
we're
that's
on a support
and that's one
system,
of the reasons why he died. And I wish I could get into it, but that's the reason he died, because of the rules of engagement during say-so. He couldn't fire on them because they didn't fire on him first, and when they did,
it's too late.
It's too late. Yeah,
and
I wish I could get into details, but I'm not.
They know these things, you know.
They certainly do.
The insurgents and the terrorists, they have technology, maybe not as readily available as in the American home, but they know these things.
But they're not stupid.
Oh yeah,
they're very clever, very, very clever.
So you know,
and we held elections. We up in Mosul, the 101st. We were the first part of the nation that held mostly free and democratic elections in the whole country, and we protected the elections. We got the banks back online. It was our forces that were walking them through this process. That savages wouldn't do that, right?
And I mean,
we'd be like, "Fuck it, it's your own devices."
Yeah,
man.
right. And I mean, obviously, there were things that did happen that were crimes against humanity, and
yes, of course.
You know, there was.
And we're not condoning that.
No, exactly. Right. But I mean, the instances do happen. You know, yes. A military unit gets ambushed, and most of the people there get killed. So the next village that they go to, they kill everybody.
And they pay the village pays the price.
It's
sucks.
One of those things. It's a real shitty situation. But if you really look at the aspect of everything that happened, could it be understood, the mentality of the individuals? So I think, you know,
in the totality of the situation, we have, the coalition forces have done, or did back then, and are still doing to some degree, exponentially more for these people, not combat related, than was done against them. And I'm not talking about, okay, let me be clear. I'm not talking about rebuilding what we destroyed during the invasion. I'm talking about repairing what Saddam's forces sabotaged when we were attacking, to blame on us or whatever. We went through a town or a village, and when we drove through, we saw that they were lining the streets as they always do, but these people looked particularly desperate, and we found out that Saddam Hussein had shut off their water during the invasion because they supported the West. So he shut off their electricity and water like a month before the invasion, and blew up, you know, the dam and the pipelines and everything. And so we actually stopped, and we called in the Army Corps of Engineers and some 12 Bravos, I think at the time, regular Army engineers, to restore water and electricity to this village. And we actually interrupted our combat operations for probably 8 to 12 hours just to help this little village survive. Again, not something savages would do.
Well, yeah, and it shows really what the American mindset is as an average. Obviously, there are people who join the military just to kill people, and
those people are sick, and they get weeded out. And again, I know I've told you about this. We were driving on some MSR, I don't know, and a couple people came out onto the road, and we slowed down, and they were hurt, they were injured. So we stopped, and the call came over, and the company commander ordered the medics to come out and help them. And when Doc McLaughlin and Doc Butcher, which was a funny name for a medic, but whatever, they went out and they were helping them. And then all of a sudden, a whole crowd of people crested the hill. They were all injured or sick, and we were stopped in the middle of this highway, basically. And we were there for probably an hour or 2 hours, assisting injured and sick people from this town. It wasn't a village; it was more of a town, probably about 300 yards off the road. Again, this is during the combat operation, so we pulled security and we were helping these people. And again, not something savages would do, but we were using our own medical supplies for use on us and coalition forces to help them, right?
And it really goes to show too. I mean, they would pick individuals that would be, in a way, a sacrifice to be on the roadside. And what if you were a gun hungry asshole and you kill him, or what if you are part of the Iraqi regime and you end up killing? So they wait until the handful of people are starting to get helped, and then they come, and it can be a little overwhelming, but it's the things we have to do,
The issue is that the Americans, I can't really speak for much of the coalition forces except for the British. They're very much like us in our mindset. But the American soldier, Marine, Airman, Sailor, whatever, is because of the character of the American military member, service member, we want to help more than we want to hurt, generally speaking.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's cost many of our comrades their lives, literally.
Yeah, and you know
exactly what I'm talking about.
And don't get us wrong, okay? Yes, children have been killed in Iraq and Vietnam, and elderly people and pregnant women, but you have to understand that there's always going to be casualties of war, but you also need to know those individuals, were they being used as some sort of a weapon? There's so much more information that doesn't seem to be released to the average American until later on when somebody writes a book about it or a movie or whatever, And
the media won't really typically show that. There's that story I told you about at the gate when the woman came up to the gate. She rolled up and she was screaming, and the two of the American guards at the gate ran to her and she was yelling at them, and the translator was trying to stop them, and then the car exploded when they got there, killed the American guards. And later on, when the translator was trying to get out that she was saying she had a bomb on and they had kidnapped her family and they had her kids. And she was tied up in the car. She had no choice. She had to do it or they would kill her kids. They forced this woman to be a suicide bomber. And not all suicide bombers are in it for the martyrdom and glory or whatever. She was screaming this, but the American soldiers, their first thought was, we have to help this woman. She's pregnant. I guess they could see she's pregnant from up there. Yeah. Their first thought was, we have to help this woman. Something's wrong with her car. But the translator was trying to listen to the woman screaming and get it out, but he was nervous and there's still going to be some sort of a time delay on anything. I mean, as a translator, it's not so quick, especially when you have those heightened emotions. Yeah, because the American soldiers, they just jumped down and ran. And this all happened. When I tell you the story, it's like, oh, they saw it, they ran over it. Yeah, it was like 10 seconds.
Yeah, it's, But so why are we even bringing this up? Why are we talking about this situation? Well, yesterday we had an opportunity to give a very special individual in our lives and part of our organization a gift of appreciation.
Yes.
So this guy, Josh, he owns the Village Gun Store
in Whitefield, New Hampshire. Yep.
And he has done a lot for our organization. But he is so humble that we heard a story from him yesterday, and it really frustrated me because, like I said, I was thinking about all these things that some civilians have been saying about us. This guy found out about a family whose house burnt down, and they were very much pioneers in a way. They lived off of their land, and everything was lost. And out of his own pocket, out of his own business, he donated a rifle and a muzzle loader, and then somebody helped purchase a shotgun for this family. It's like, does that sound very savage-like?
No, and the thing that makes it the more special than just donating guns is that, like you were saying, as Pioneer family, they didn't buy meat from the store. They hunted for their protein, and that's what sustained them throughout the year. So when Josh and his wife Nicole, when Village Gun Store donated these weapons to the family, they weren't just donating the weapons; they were donating basically the ability to get food for the whole family.
Yeah,
You know?
and we also have another strong alliance with somebody who is the VSO out here in New Hampshire, and her father was denied all kinds of treatment, acknowledgments, and everything as a Vietnam veteran that she swore to make a difference. And here she is, even during COVID, pretty much day after day, helping service members, veterans transitioning, get their comp and pen stuff, get their survivor benefits taken care of. She just is, I think, one of my most favorite people to work with, because there's certain things she cannot do as far as dealing with, senators and things, because she
Sure.
works for the government.
Conflict of interest type
But
things.
we can, so we have a great relationship with that. And I think, again, that's not very savage-like. It's not, someone who sounds like they would be a baby killer.
Again, we've said it before. Well, sure, we'll say it again. Just be careful when you paint with such a broad brush. There are members of the military that are savages, of course, but there are members of every organization everywhere that are savages. But try to look at the members of the military as individuals and see what the military has done that is not only not savage-like, but humanitarian.
Yeah.
Everybody says, the U.S. military needs to stop acting like the world's police force. Well, that's because of the American character. We want to help, not hurt, generally speaking.
Yeah.
So that's not very savage-like. So if you can break away from your echo chamber a little bit, try to look at the good things and not focus on the bad things so much, and maybe it will change your perspective just a little bit. So maybe bear that in mind next time you have an impulse to just to flippantly say, all Marines or all soldiers or all whatever or all anything or X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
Because it's never the case.
And one more quick story of another veteran. So this guy gets essentially what becomes a brain tumor from nerve agent gas, and literally had to go under surgery within the next 24 hours, was not supposed to live. And even do all that, and all it took on his family and himself, ends up starting a nonprofit to continue to help veterans, not only veterans, but first responders and their families. And to me, that doesn't sound like you're much of a baby killer or a savage.
Well, thank you.
I really beg people to dive a little bit more into others' characters before they, like you said, paint with such a broad brush.
And they should, because it's the fair thing to do. But
Yeah.
we have to move into, and you got to be fair.
Yeah.
As an American, be fair, because otherwise it's going to be the pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah, and
What happened to you?
right? It's really
Inside
what
joke,
it comes down
but
to.
If you're out there, you know.
But
So,
under the
firing
circumstances, I think I want to take a break and not do the firing squad, but
Okay.
just give a shout out to all of our brothers and sisters at arms, whether they be veterans, first responders, or those who are actively fighting the good fight.
Thank you, all of you, men and women in uniform, of all uniforms.
Absolutely, including your son, who is literally waiting for the call.
He's waiting for the call to go to
boot camp.
basic.
So a lot of respect for him, a lot of respect for the men and women who are out there doing these things on their own honor and merit. I think it's great.
Yeah. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for joining us on today's podcast.
For more information on the services we provide our veterans and first responders and their families, please visit our Facebook page, Veterans to Veterans Group, or our website, veteranstoveteransgroup.com, or feel free to email us at veteran2veterangroup@gmail.com, and that's with the number 2, veteran2veterangroup@gmail.com.